Hey there, it's been a minute or two, so let's get straight into this full build video of Takom's M9 Ace, or Armoured Combat Earth Mover in 1/35th scale. As you'll see in a second, this kit contains two marking options, this US Army Desert Yellow and this NATO camo with the green, black and brown that we're also used to. Now, here are the sprues, which is not a large amount, but this vehicle is at the most complex of vehicles, especially since it's basically a box with tracks and a dozer at the front. Here are the instructions, which look like typical Takom instructions, and then the marking sheet and the photo etch, which is just two small parts. Here are the tracks, which are just single links, which you make into a full length then. Here are the road wheels. There's only 8 of them, 4 on each side. Here's the lower hull, which is nicely molded in one part. This sprue contains most of the rear compartment with the cupola of the driver, as this vehicle only had one crew. And then here are a lot of the smaller parts that go into the dozer. So the build started off with putting in the placement for the sprocket, and I still have no idea if this part has a name, even though it's so prevalent on every single armoured vehicle and tank and so on. But either way, the build started with this, and then the torsion bars would be inserted into those holes there. Now, a thing to note at this step is that, as it notes in the instruction, or tells you in the instruction, you can put the torsion bars in different configurations. I mean, then again, there's no torsion bars included in the kit, but there would be in real life. So you can put them in different configurations, as if the vehicle is either digging, which is the front ones down and the other ones up, or driving, which is flat, normal, or lifted up, which is what I done, I believe. So here you just have to put the pins that are on the suspension arms just like this, with the front ones up and the rear ones down. Takom provide this jig to ensure that you've placed the suspension arms in the correct configuration for whatever version you're doing, either the raised or lowered or even straight version, so that, well, they're how they're meant to be. And this is how the race configuration should look. So the idler goes at the back. So editing me here, and let's get something straight. That is a sprocket, not an idler wheel. And yeah, I had no idea why I said idler. There is no idler in this vehicle. I mean, one of the wheels acts as an idler, I guess, and it provides power. Unless the sprocket in some way provides power, I have no idea how this vehicle works. If there's some M9 Ace mechanics here or whatever, and I don't go ahead, but that is a sprocket, not an idler. Just let's make that clear. Back, just like any other US armoured vehicle, let's say an Abrams, it's at the back. Then here are the 4 road wheels. There is no idler on the M9 Ace, which I found out while I was building the kit and saw that there was no idler. I'm reminded to do your research first. So here's the floor of the dozer compartment, and this was cemented in. There was a rather good fit, and well, it wasn't going to fall out. Here is this part that goes at the back of the dozer compartment, and I have no idea what this was actually, what all this wiring and parts are, but well, it's very nicely detailed. As you can see, no need to scratch build your own wires or anything. And although that this is hidden, if you build the kit how I built it, since it goes here and then there's this part in front of it that blocks it, Takom still provided this insane level of detail, even if it's not essentially going to be visible in the end, which, well, props to them. Here is that part that I was talking about before that will block that other very highly detailed part. And well, let's take a moment to note the kit was glued with Mr. Cement S, the one with the blue cap as you can see, but I also later used for larger parts which will need some correctment before ultimately gluing them in place. I used Mr. Cement Deluxe, I believe it's called, if I remember correctly. It's the one with the yellow cap, and it's a sort of thicker cement which has a longer drying time than extra thin. As well, this Mr. Cement S has a rather short drying time, it dries very quickly. So the yellow one with the yellow cap with the larger brush, or at least the bigger bottle that I got had the larger brush, that is it has a longer drying time which allows for parts to be slightly altered before gluing, which I find to be more useful with larger parts, like let's say 2 hull halves or the sides, or even the fuselage halves of an aircraft. As I waffled, you could see that I was gluing on these parts here, which, well, I still have no idea what they are, but there's like these little wheel parts on the end, so I believe that these may be used to push this part out and maybe clean the dosing compartment. As you see, there's a hole in there through which this rod goes, and well, I didn't cement it originally in place so that it could be slid open and closed, but ultimately it can't even be moved due to the weathering of how I made the weathering on the inside of the dosing compartment. But well, I guess it's a cool play feature if you care. So here the floor part of the rear compartment is being added. It has a nice anti-slip texture that Takom molded in with that diamond pattern that you would see on many floor surfaces wherever you go outside if it's a metal floor. Props to Takom on that one then. This part was for some reason glued with that blue capped Mr. Cement S instead of the yellow cap, but I guess I just didn't think of it at the time. There's a very nice fit on this part with a lot of pins on the under side of it and holes in the floor to attach it very stably, so there is no risk of it coming off. As you can see, I'm putting cement rather everywhere to ensure that it does not come off in case of anything, and you saw that I put down weight and it was very stable. Here is what I believe is either a radiator or part of the engine cover that is being assembled. These are large parts that have very nice connection points and are easy to glue and assemble together just like the rest of the kit. So I hope you enjoyed some music there, and let's continue with the build. So here's that yellow capped Mr. Cement S, which I'm using here to attach larger parts with attachment pins that I may not necessarily get in place first time, as you can see here. So that Mr. Cement S allows me to reposition it and still have a good joint. As you can see, there's 6 smoke launchers on the front of that part. And on the note of smoke launchers, let's talk a bit more about the specification of this vehicle. So the type of vehicle, it's obviously not a tank, it's a combat engineering vehicle used by engineers from the US Marine Corps and the US Army, and its main tasks were to eliminate enemy obstacles, as you can see with that large dozer on the front. So interestingly, even though it's not heavily armoured, as most of the armour is Kevlar and steel, it weighs 15.8 tons, which, if you were to take in the retrospective of a World War II tank, let's say a Panther which weighed around 50 tons, that would be a rather large amount. As you can see, I'm adding some jerry cans onto here and other parts that would go on to the top of that floor of the compartment at the back. So as I add more parts onto this back area, the M9 was created in 1986, or at least it debuted, let's say, in 1986, and it was made with a road speed of 30 miles per hour, or 48 kilometers an hour, and is transportable in aircraft such as the C-130, C-141, or the C-5, and can even swim at a speed of 3 miles per hour, or 4.8 kilometers an hour under ideal conditions. And even though it can swim, these parts are not required to be maintained by the Army or the Marine Corps, as the swim related operations that it was made for are no longer needed, so these components are no longer maintained. So as I add more parts onto this back area, the M9 was created in 1986, or at least it debuted, let's say, in 1986, and it was made with a road speed of 30 miles per hour, or 48 kilometers an hour, and is transportable in aircraft such as the C-130, C-141, or the C-5, and can even swim at a speed of 3 miles per hour, or 4.8 kilometers an hour under ideal conditions. And even though it can swim, these parts are not required to be maintained by the Army or the Marine Corps, as the swim related operations that it was made for are no longer needed, so these components are no longer maintained. So also some more additional information. A typical US Army Combat Engineer Battalion contains 22 aces, 7 per company, plus an operational readiness float. And in the active US Army right now, there is a total of 447 M9 aces, which proves that, just like any other modern armoured vehicle, with upgrades and changes to the vehicle, it can go from the 80s till even now, the modern day. Take in mind, let's think of an Abrams or a Leopard, they've been constantly changed from even the 70s and further back. Returning to the build and the kit itself, I'll be adding this rear wall now, which has a door on itself at the back where there's that gaping hole. At the time I was not yet sure whether I leave it open or closed, so I decided to just leave it off. As you can see now, I'll be using the yellow capped Mr. Cement Deluxe to ensure that there's first a fit on this large part with no secure connection, and then I'll use Mr. Cement S at the bottom to fuse the plastics safely together. A bit more about the history of the kit itself. It was it is a Takom kit released in 2015, being the only boxing that Takom have released so far. Kit number 2020 or 2020. And if you're looking for an M9 Ace in 1/35 scale, this is your only bet, as no other company has made a 1/35 M9 Ace. Unless you go for 3D printing, then yep, this is the only available thing if you want to make this vehicle. So if you've watched any of my aircraft videos, you know that this is the time I feared most, as I hate attaching large parts which could easily leave a seam on the kit or have some sort of gap in it. As you see, Mr. Cement S was probably not the correct glue type to start off with, and I probably should have used Mr. Cement Deluxe here, as the part just came right off. If you do not know why I don't like big parts, it's because there's a rather large area to glue, so if you cement, let's say, the back and then start going further, the back could uncement itself and come up, and then there's just a lot of hassle with doing all of this at the same time. And well, especially in aircraft, if you do it wrong, it will leave a large seam down the middle of most aircraft, so that's where my despise came from. As you see in the dozer compartment, that part is moved forward, but in the final build it'll be moved all the way back to cover up that nicely detailed part there. After putting on the right side, we obviously put on the left. Then the vehicle is asymmetric, as you can obviously tell, because of the cupola, the engine cover / compartment, I guess that's what it is, and the rear also. So the dozer assembly began with these two parts being cemented together. On the topic of dozers, in Operation Desert Storm, which was the first deployment of the M9 Ace in a large scale, some operators disapproved of it and were more drawn to the D7 dozer, which is your more typical type of unarmoured bulldozer that you would see, maybe even on a construction site anywhere, as they believed it was easier to use than the M9 Ace. However, it was quickly proven that the M9 could easily outpace traditional dozers, being able to go 30 miles per hour, which is a lot quicker than those traditional bulldozers, and so was adopted as the conventional earth mover in the US Army and US Marine Corps. Here the tools were added to the top of the blade, and the lights were also added. These light parts will be important onto how I will paint the M9 Ace. If you saw in the thumbnail, you maybe noticed why, but you'll see if you didn't. So these lights had a rather small attachment with this sort of semicircle sticking out of the bottom, having to be attached, and I accidentally spilled a bit too much cement here, as you'll see, and that resulted in that part melting away and as you can see, the light just toppled over. In the end I used CA glue to so that it would have a stronger bond. Here the light covers are also added, and they strengthened those lights as I could glue the lights to the light covers. If you look at pictures of improved and upgraded versions of the M9, you see that these lights at the front are slightly different. This will make you be able to tell, is this an early or a later M9 variant. Now this part here, it didn't really have any joint. I mean, it did have a rather easy joint here, but there was no way of telling was it centered or was it not centered, which kind of threw me off, as you have to just guess yourself. So the parts that I'll be adding now in a second are used to link the dozer blade to the hull and allow it to move up and down. These are basically the arms of the dozer if you think about it. So another interesting fact, during Operation Desert Storm, it was seen that the M9 Ace could move at speeds matching or even outpacing those of the M1 Abrams or the M2 Bradley, which was another thing that made it worth of being the US Army and US Marine Corps dozer in service. So this is how the M9 looks with the dozer all in place. Well, rather intimidating if you were to see it from the front coming at you. There's also these parts here, which, if you watch till later on, you will notice that I left them off till the really end of the assembly, as well that would allow me to take the dozer blade off, as it would obstruct the painting of the compartment inside. But essentially that was the construction done, except from the front of the dozer being added. Now, I don't know if the dozer articulated or anything, but it seems as if the dozer could either move up or down, with it being split into two halves. So again, if there's any specialists, let me know, because I have no idea. Here the two only PE parts included in the kit were added. As you can see, there's a spare road wheel or road wheel front on top of one of these, and well, that would sum up the build of the kit. Here are all the parts that I left off for painting, including the rear door that you see there. Now here is the thing painted. Okay, I did not record painting, yep, you got me there, but I had a rather hard time with modelling at this period, so I just wanted to have a nice little break from the camera and just have a nice smooth painting session with no disturbance, let's say. So let me essentially break down the painting process here. So I first used some sort of dark green. I have no idea what paint this was, as this was painted a couple months ago, so, or 2 months ago if I remember correctly. So I used a dark green first, then added white to that mixture, painted the sort of as if I was pre-shading by painting the inside of the panels with that lighter colour, and then painted with the original colour over it. So that's where you'll see that the inside of the panels are a bit brighter. So either way, here is the diorama that I thought for this vehicle, as if it was climbing up some sort of hill, and then there's going to be soldiers from either the Marine Corps or just regular soldiers on the left of it. I still have no idea what figures I'll use for it. So the tracks have now, and the road wheel rubber around it have been now painted black. Those were left off on the painted version, as you saw a second ago. I just added them on, and they could have been taken off to allow for easier painting. Here is also the dozer blade painted up, being added onto the vehicle, and also the tools were just painted in basically with just one tone for the metal and one tone for the wood. I did not do anything special I didn't think it needed anything special for that. They're not that visible, and I think the other parts that I'll add to the dozer will take attention away from them, so it's not really a point of painting them like too extravagantly. So as you can nicely see that effect of the sort of shading on the panels here on the side. Not so prevalent on the road wheels, but yeah, on the front of the dozer you can also see this sort of mottled technique that I used to, create a bit of variation. So bringing in the bowl of warm water, we will be moving on to the decals. For the decals, I will be using Takom's M46 decals with these tiger and lion faces that were used in the Korean War. And if you did not know, then this is a what if the M9 Ace was used in the Korean War. So first we use the green bottle of, how's this, Ultra Set or whatever you could call it. It's basically your micro set, and then the red bottle is your micro soul. So here's that mouth decal. I'll be adding it onto the dozer blade as if it was at the mouth or the front of a tiger. If you didn't know, then in the Korean War, the US Army used this to intimidate the North Koreans, as well, basically they were scared of it. And this may seem stupid to us now that they were scared of a tank with a lion face, but well, if you saw a tank driving at you, then that will be rather scary. So here we used the red cap to make the decal soften into the plastic and the surface, and then I used a cotton bud to press into every detail. Since the dozer blade is split in half there, it was rather a lot of pressing. And as you can see, all the decals are done. This is a US Marine Corps marking, and I have no idea if any of it makes sense with the numbers and the designations and whatever, but well, I just think it looks good, and since it's a what if, the M9 was made like 30 years earlier, I don't think the decals are the most unrealistic part about it. As you see, the light covers were painted red here, as if they were the eyes, and then the lights themselves were painted white with black insides, as if, well, they were the actual eyes. So yeah, I have no idea if those markings anywhere here make sense, but I'm pretty pleased with how it turns out, with the arms on the side of the dozer as well. So yeah, tell me your thoughts down in the comments. Well, if you notice that my voice for the end of that recording was a bit used, then yeah, it was. Anyways, I put gloss varnish onto the whole surface of the vehicle, so that the pin wash would be easier to apply. A pin wash is easier to apply over a gloss varnish, as it allows it to slide easier over the surface and go into those deeper crevices. As you'll see in a second, I used Tamiya's dark brown pin wash for this purpose. Hit right here with that brush. It's my go-to, as I find it the easiest to work with and the easiest to clean away any excess. The brush also is a decent size, so you don't have to get any other brush dirty for it. So here we just apply it over any pins, or should I say rivets, and onto any panel lines that there is. Some of the decals also had to be pushed into the panel lines to make them look as if they're part of the vehicle, so we also just do it over the decal, as you can see the star here. So a brush dampened in white spirit was used to remove any excess, and this is the end result. I did not want to make it look as if the whole vehicle was grimy, so the top surface is not as dirty as the rest of it. And applying another coat of gloss varnish to seal it in, we went onto the general weathering. So here in the dozer compartment, I used Ammo by Mig's rain mark effect, which here I used as dust. I probably need to get a specific dust product, as this isn't the best looking dust, but here it's just kind of stippled onto the surface as if it's meant to be some sort of dust sediments building up, just mostly all around this dozer compartment, and then left to dry for around 20 minutes. After it has dried, dampen your brush slightly in white spirit and stipple lightly at the surface to break it up a bit, that sort of even surface, and make it look as if it's just dust gathering kind of everywhere. You can also streak up, which I'll do in a second, to make it look as if the dust is just kind of everywhere in this compartment. Because in Korea it was muddy and dusty at the same time, also obviously snowy, since there was part of the war, most of it happening in winter, but well, the conditions on the field were rather muddy, so this compartment would be full of either dry mud or dust, or wet mud if it was gathering up mud. Here is the effect that was achieved. This was obviously done on the dozer and the side, as you see now. And for the wet mud, we will use Ammo by Mig's acrylic mud paste. This is an acrylic paste, so it can be thinned down with water and does not need any enamel thinner or white spirit to thin it down. Which is, well, good if you have people in the house who do not like the smell, and, well, in general, the smell of white spirit and enamel thinner is not too nice if you think about it. So be careful in the application of this, as well, don't get it up there. Yep, smear it off. As well, when this thing dries, it will be a hard time taking it off. So I tried applying it rather randomly here, as you see, but humans can't be too random and can't make things look good when they're trying to be random. So I just ended up applying it mostly on the bottom and then a large amount on the sides. This was obviously all going to be changed with further matte tones and dry matte tones. So after enjoying some music, let's move over to some weathering. So here I applied that acrylic mud paste from Ammo to the side here to act as some dried mud deposits that may have been there from some long time ago on the M9 Ace that were not cleaned when maintaining. But then again, I think during the Korean War they wouldn't have much time to clean these sort of vehicles that would be used the whole time, so well, that's that. This was added mainly behind the wheels and the tracks, but also a bit onto the running gear to act as if some mud was deposited onto them and then dried over time of maybe the vehicle not being used so often. Obviously the colour of the paste itself is not too accurate to real mud and does not look that good for actual mud, but this will obviously be later changed with specified mud products. You can also see here that I'm adding small amounts to the sides here, as well mud would build up on there also, and probably not in such a large amount as I'm doing it here everywhere, even in that bulldozer bay, but I just want to exaggerate it. In the end it's all just some artistic license, let's say, about this weathering, as vehicles are maintained in the army and would never get this dirty, especially like behind the running gear, where the running gear and the suspension would need to function and the dried mud could obscure the functionality of it. And again, this is a what if about a vehicle that was produced 30 years after the Korean War, so take this all loosely with a grain of salt. Continuing with the weathering, here I used the rain mark effects we have seen previously as splatters of dust and some dust build up. So here we speckling it with, a cotton bud. Yes, I could not find a toothpick for the life of me in my house, but either way we're using a cotton bud here and a flat brush, as this will be able to absorb most paint and then speckle it onto the surface. I also have a second flat brush which is slightly dampened in white spirit to clean away any larger speckles in areas that I would not want it, such as at the really top of the hull. This is a nice weathering method that I have used on a different build that will not be featured on this channel, as a sort of like test to see how it will turn out. But yeah, I'm first speckling here with rain mark effects to act as dust, and then I'll be speckling with mud effects so that it looks as if mud was speckled onto the vehicle. I hope you're still here with me, and if you are, then I don't ask for it, but like and subscribe if you're already down there writing a comment or something. As I don't think the algorithm has been nice to my new videos, as I have not uploaded in a while, but either way, yeah, do those things. I don't do it if you don't want to, but with that out of the way, let's move on to the thing that we are doing with the weathering. So again, using a cotton bud and a flat brush. Here I am using Wet Mud Effects from Ammo by Mig. I can't remember which one. It's either like Russian Wet Mud or something along those lines. And I am essentially just aggressively speckling it all over the surface. This kip is not sped up. I was just rather aggressive with it, as I wanted to get it kind of everywhere, in between every nook, cranny, and so on. I wanted to also get this a lot on the running gear to, look as if it's being heavily used here in the wet mud of Korea, as it was then during the war. So if you want to have a little view into my diorama idea, it will be the hill that I have showed earlier, and the M9 will be coming up it, and then there will be soldiers standing in a rice field where the M9 is. I'll show that in a second, but that will be a completely different video, so stay tuned, I guess. Also, I won't show it on camera, but after speckling with this mud effect, I used a different mud effect, which was like European moist ground or something like that, or just moist ground, I can't remember what it's called, and speckled that on top of this Russian mud or whatever it is to get this sort of multi-layered effect, because in the end, when you look outside, mud is just not one brown colour. Well, here's how the M9 Ace looks after all of that weathering. This is the side that I did not record, and it was done first as a test, so it may not look as good as the other side. I also done here almost the underside, and yes, I did leave the underside blank, as I do not believe that painting the underside changes anything, as in the end you won't even be able to see the bottom as it's standing on a diorama. So here's that little sneak peek into the diorama. As I said, it's going to be a rice field or a wheat field. It doesn't even matter, as you won't be able to tell, but I drilled holes into the surface and then used PV and then put PVA onto the edge of these. I hit the mic again. I put PVA onto the edge of these brush hairs that I cut off and stuck them inside. Then with a tweezer, I got them together and pushed them inside the hole. Now this is a rather hard thing to record, as you have to be precise with putting them in the holes, so this may be the only footage I get of it, but either way, the M9 Ace is done. And there's a figure up in the cupola that I did not record the painting of, as it is probably one of the worst figures I've done in this past year, but yep, there's a figure up there. So, well, that's the M9 Ace done. Go ahead, tell me below what you think of it, and enjoy these shoots. Till the next one. Hey there, it's been a minute or two, so let's go straight into this full video. Interesting video. And this is the only boxing of the M9 that Takom have released. It is also the only 1/35th M9 Ace available on the market, so if you like this aircraft, humans can't really be random, as you'll notice. Hit my mic.